So, in the past few months, there has been a lot of money being invested into the United States by tons of different corporations. Uh, you've got everything from auto manufacturers like Toyota to investment firms like SoftBank, all investing billions and billions of dollars into the United States. You also see consumer confidence at very high levels. You see more people applying for first-time home loans. Um, and altogether, you see a lot of signs that people are looking forward to an improved economy. And in fact, that was one of the major pillars of the Trump campaign, one of the main reasons many people voted for him. And of course, the media, the establishment, the Democratic establishment, and others have come out and they've tried to say that, well, the reason the economy is looking good right now is actually because of the previous administration. So they try to say that Obama passed off a good economy to Trump, which of course is an absolute joke. We're talking about an administration that did not have 1 year of 3% GDP growth, which is pathetic. I think he's the only president to ever do that, to ever suck that bad. Um, and then of course you can look at the fact that our debt under our debt, national debt, went from around 10 trillion to basically 20 trillion dollars. It doubled under the 8 years of the Obama administration, an accumulation of debt that surpasses the debt accumulated by all other presidents combined, ever, period. So to say that there was a good economy passed to Trump is just absurd on a whole new level. It's not true in the slightest. And the media tries to do whatever they can to make it seem like the reason that there's all this investment, the reason there's all this consumer confidence, all this money in the stock market, which is one that can actually be attributed to Obama somewhat. The stock market did okay under him in many ways. They're trying to say that it's all because of Obama and that none of it's because of Trump. And this article from the New York Post just illustrates exactly why this is happening and exactly why it is indeed because of Trump. So, from the New York Post, Trump wants to slash taxes on, here it comes, businesses. President Trump ordered his White House aides to speed up efforts to craft a tax reform plan that would cut the corporate tax rate to 15% and slash personal rates as well, a new report said Monday. And of course, right now, our corporate tax rate is the highest in the industrial world, and it puts a lot of pressure on corporations, different businesses that have to put all this money towards the government when that money could be used to hire other people and invest in their businesses, not wasted in a bloated government bureaucracy. And that's it right there. That is one of the main reasons. It's the tax rates being cut across the board, but especially for businesses when you're talking about investment. And it's the cut on regulations. And again, we've got a regulatory system that costs us something like $2 trillion a year. And many of these regulations are completely onerous, are completely overbearing, completely unreasonable, and really shouldn't be there. It's just justifying endless bureaucracy, basically. So, of course, the media and the Democratic establishment don't ever like to talk about it, but that's it. That's it right there. The corporate tax rate getting cut, and it is getting cut dramatically if they're able to reach the 15%. I'm skeptical. I think it'll probably be closer to 20, but if they could get to 15, that would be amazing. And here is why. Trump said he wanted to get it done, the source said, but was not overly concerned if his plan sent the deficit skyrocketing. The current corporate tax rate is 35%, so it would be cut more than in half. a White House spokesman who didn't immediately respond to requests for comment from the Post. National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin plan to meet Tuesday to talk about Trump's tax proposals with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Paul Ryan, Senate Finance Chairman Orrin Hatch, and House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady of Texas. Trump said he would announce his plan the following day. So it sounds like we'll have an announcement on Wednesday for the tax plan, and whether or not it's going to be anything beyond a corporate tax, we're not sure. At this point, of course, hopefully it will be, but any tax cuts would be good, especially corporate tax cuts, because that's something that's just going to all around help the economy. Of course, it's going to create more jobs. It's going to allow these businesses to be able to invest more of their own money towards expanding and improving. And then, of course, we've got the looming government shutdown. And it's being made, out to be some humongous deal. Of course, if the government shut down because of lack of funding, it would shut down, non-essential government entities. Of course, there's still going to be police officers and firefighters and stuff like that. And we've had a government shutdown before. It wasn't that big of a deal, which is funny because it actually goes to show how useless the government is. But of course, avoiding the shutdown would be preferable. And you've actually got media organizations coming out and sort of attacking the Trump administration for certain reasons when it comes to the government shutdown. And here's why. So this is an article from CNBC. Congress aims to avoid shutdown while Trump presses for 100-day wins. Congress returns from a 2-week break, facing a deadline to keep the government operating, while President Donald Trump presses harder for some legislative accomplishments in his first 100 days of office, as his first 100 days wind to a close. The week is shaping up to be a collision of needs between the two, and time is quickly running out on both. Government funding ends Friday, allowing only 3 full days of legislative activity after the House returns late Tuesday night, and the last-minute controversial requests from the administration are threatening to make a deal harder to reach. At the same time, Trump is pushing Congress to move quickly on another attempt to pass a repeal bill of the Affordable Care Act, even though House Republicans aren't unified on a path forward. To add more to Congress's plate, Trump told the Associated Press last week that he intends to unveil his plan to overhaul the tax code, another priority for Republicans, but a gesture that caught Republican congressional leaders by surprise. So they're saying, he's trying to cut taxes for people. He's trying to do another repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And just all these things. They're saying that this is a problem because we've got this government shutdown looming, and if we cut taxes, this is what you hear from the media. This is what you hear from the Democrat establishment. This is what you hear from even some so-called Republicans. They say that if you cut taxes, like Trump's going to do, that there's not going to be as much money for the government. So of course, Congress is freaking out, the media is freaking out and saying, hey, you're talking about cutting taxes, you're talking about doing an overhaul of, Obamacare and all this stuff, just, putting too much on our plate and doing things that are, that's going to hurt our funding. Well, here's the thing. Reality does not agree with the idea that when you cut taxes that there is less money for the government. And I know on its face, on the surface, that might sound a little ridiculous. If the government is taxing people at a lower rate, they're going to make less money, right? Well, no, that's not what happens. And this is from the Heritage Foundation and shows exactly why that doesn't happen. Tax cuts increase federal revenues. A New York Times article, Deficit Spending Can Help Republicans, by Daniel Altman, shows that old, wrong assumptions die hard. The article reports that, quote, from the beginning of 2001 through the third quarter of 2002, the federal government leapt from a surplus, including Social Security, amounting to 2.3% of GDP, gross domestic product, to a deficit of the same size. By itself, the current deficit is not terribly threatening. Indeed, running a modest deficit during an economic downturn can be useful, as long as the policies behind the deficit, lower taxes and higher spending, benefit consumers and businesses. So, of course, you've got an article from the New York Times, an older article, obviously, but an article that is saying, as the New York Times and the media, the Democrat establishment always do, they say that it's government managing your money that is more efficient. That is the way to go. When government uses your money, they're going to use it properly. That's the idea that's put forward by the New York Times, and I think most of us out there know that that is not true. And then it goes on. The article then claims that the 1980s Reagan tax cuts failed to increase tax revenues. Quote, the White House says lower tax rates will lead consumers to work more and businesses to expand, resulting in higher tax revenues and eventually closing the gap? Yeah. That notion, chided as, quote, voodoo economics by critics, turned out to be false when it was last in vogue during the 1980s. So they're saying that the tax cuts that Ronald Reagan did not increase federal revenue from taxes. They just basically outright said that. Turns out they're wrong. However, the numbers crunched by Heritage's Brian Rydell show otherwise. In 1980, the last year before the tax cuts, tax revenues were $956 billion in constant 1996 dollars. Revenues exceeded that 1980 level in 8 of the next 10 years. Annual revenues over the next decade averaged $102 billion above their 1980 level in constant 1996 dollars. So, Reagan cuts taxes, and federal tax revenue increases by an average of $102 billion more over the next 10 years. And they somehow say that, I mean, the numbers are there. You can look at the numbers. They made more money. There was more tax revenue. But here's the caveat. Here's what they do. Here's what they say to try to say that that's not true. Any increase in budget deficits was therefore the result of spending increases rather than tax-induced revenue decreases, because Ronald Reagan did not completely have Republican majorities in all the areas. He didn't have Republican majorities like Trump has now, so he had to work with the Democrats a lot more, and of course you wind up getting a lot of government spending because of that, because that's what the Democrats like to do. They like to spend your money. So there you have it. The federal government made more money in tax revenue, but because of the Democrats during Reagan's presidency, there was more government spending of that money. So then because of that, outlets like the New York Times, of course, the usual suspects, come out and try to say that the Reagan tax cuts didn't work somehow. Absolutely bizarre logic on all levels. And that right there is why the government talking about cutting taxes and how that's a bad thing because there's not going to be more money for the government, and how the government's going to shut down, which wouldn't even be a big deal if it did. It's all just ludicrous political hackery as usual, and no one really needs to pay attention to it. So now we move on to InfoWars and the upcoming French election. Le Pen, that would be Marine Le Pen, the the would-be first female president of France. Le Pen, it is time to free the French people. Viva la revolution! Only, without guillotines chopping a bunch of people's heads off mercilessly, maybe this time around. Marine Le Pen delivered a rousing speech to her enthusiastic supporters last night, declaring that it is time to, quote, free the French people from the destructive policies of open borders, open immigration, and crushing EU regulations. Quote, the French have to make a very simple choice, she declared. Either we continue on a path to total lawlessness, without borders nor protection, and leading to delocalization, unfair international competition, mass immigration, and free circulation of terrorists. Or you can choose a France with borders, which protect jobs, buying power, our security, and national identity. That sounds like a hard choice to me. Quote, it's time to free the French people, she announced. Le Pen called her opponent phony outsider Emmanuel Macron the heir of Hollande. And Hollande is Francois Hollande is the current president of France. And warned that former Rothschild banker would continue with the status quo, a, quote, reign of money, on a pathway towards the demise of national sovereignty at the demands of the globalist establishment. The first step to lead the French to the Elyssees is past, she said. The French must seize this historic opportunity. The great issue in this election is the rampant globalization that is putting our civilization at risk. Le Pen and Front National have managed to overcome a variety of roadblocks put in their path by the devious government media technology machine. And of course, you had the media, our media, the French media, the French establishment, the European Union, different world leaders, all the usual suspects of, scumbaggery, coming out and attacking Marie Le Pen as, of course, a far-right nationalist. You've heard it time and time again. They love to just have a nice little rubber stamp label that they can put on people, whether it's racist or sexist or, right-winger or conspiracy theorist. They love to have these labels they can put on people to just actually shut down debate and, have people be looked at as sort of a fringe, controversial figure. It's a completely overused, tired tactic at this point, but, it gets thrown out there again and again and again because apparently the globalist playbook has not been, updated since 1913 or so. And then, so it says that, of course, she's facing all these roadblocks, and boy, is she facing some roadblocks. Facebook targeted 30,000 pro-Le Pen accounts for censorship, claiming that they were spreading, quote, fake news. 500,000 voters, the vast majority of whom were likely anti-Le Pen, were provided with the opportunity to vote twice with duplicate ballots. But the French government opted to postpone an investigation into the matter until after the election. So as incredible as that sounds, yes, 500,000 duplicate ballots got sent to an area of voters that is most likely anti-Le Pen, and then the French police come out and say that they're not going to investigate it until after the election, if they even investigate it. So, complete absurdity. The European Union has burdened her with major legal distractions, including retroactively lifting her parliamentary immunity for prosecution for simply tweeting images of ISIS terror attacks back in 2015, for which she could face up to 3 years in prison if convicted. So if you have parliamentary immunity, that means that you couldn't be charged for doing something like that. Then of course, she puts out, because her message obviously is anti-Islamic, immigration. She sees all the obvious problems that, are going on in Europe and France in particular because of that. And she wants to put, a stop to that. So of course she has all this opposition to it, and she merely tweets out images of some of the atrocities committed by ISIS, who has admitted in their own manifestos that they will use the open border immigration policies of Europe and others to infiltrate their countries. They've admitted that. So she goes out and she shows the horrible things these people are doing, and then they get rid of her immunity for that, and now she could potentially be get in trouble, face crime, face prison time for doing that, for tweeting, because of course in many areas of Europe there is no such thing as free speech, and more it seems like that's fading away in the United States, unfortunately. Uh, French authorities recently arrested her top advisor and bodyguard under suspicion of misuse of public funds in a political witch hunt that ultimately backfired. Quote, French authorities have made yet another monumental error in judgment after arresting Marine Le Pen's chief of staff and bodyguard for questioning over alleged misuse of public funds to pay parliamentary assistance. The equivalent of a jaywalking ticket in terms of public opinion, reported Zero Hedge. Quote, by making La Montagne out of Le Molehill, the latest debacle by French authorities is the most recent in a long list of backfired attempts to delegitimize the National Front candidate, including the refusal of French banks to lend money to Le Pen's campaign and the MSM's ongoing hit jobs calling Le Pen far-right extreme on a regular basis, for example. So of course she's not getting all the funding, from the big donors. She's got the entire establishment against her, coming out and calling her basically a Nazi, a far-right extremist. And then, of course, you've also got all the polls coming out and saying that there's no way that she can win. Sounds a lot like the run-up to the election of Donald Trump. So we'll see what happens. But of course, you've got all the usual suspects coming out, throwing everything, including the kitchen sink at Marine Le Pen. 100% pushback against her being the next president of France, even though she would be the first female president of France. But where you hear nothing, where you hear crickets from the feminists and from all the people, every single one of them that came out and said that if you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, you were sexist. You don't hear a peep from any of them about Marine Le Pen. So, of course, just, absurd level hypocrisy from certain individuals out there. You all know who you are. And now we move on to France24.com, not related to the French election, actually. North Korean media issue threat to wipe out U.S. Another day, another baseless threat from the little fat man in Pyongyang to blow up the United States. Good luck with that. An official North Korean website warned Monday that Pyongyang will wipe out the United States if Washington starts a war on the peninsula, the latest tit-for-tat saber-rattling that has sent tensions soaring in the region. The U.S. supercarrier Carl Vinson will arrive in the waters of the north of the Korean peninsula in a matter of days, quote-unquote, Vice President Mike Pence said Saturday, amid reports the North could be preparing a sixth nuclear test. In a series of editorials by Rodong Sinmun newspaper, probably said that wrong, the official mouthpiece of the ruling Workers' Party said that the North's first forces were undeterred and called the U.S. strike group's imminent arrival undisguised military blackmail. Quote, such threat may startle a jellyfish, but can never work on the DPRK, it said Monday, using the country's official name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. What a joke. A day earlier, it said the North's revolutionary forces were, quote, combat ready to sink the U.S. nuclear aircraft carrier with a single strike of devastating force. The editorial, described as being written by an army officer, said it was a, quote, big miscalculation for Washington to compare the North to Syria, which did not launch an immediate counterattack after a U.S. cruise missile strike earlier this month. In the event of an attack, it said, the world, quote, the world will witness how Washington's rash nuclear aircraft carriers are turned into a huge pile of steel and buried at sea, and how a country called America is wiped out from the earth. Just amazing, amazing rhetoric, even for North Korean standards. There is speculation the North may conduct another test to mark the 85th anniversary of the founding of the Korean People's Army on Tuesday. but it has never tested an intercontinental ballistic missile with sufficient range to reach the continental United States, although it has ambitions to develop one, nor is it known to have miniaturized atomic technology sufficient to be able to fit a nuclear warhead on a rocket. U.S. officials have warned repeatedly that, quote, all options are on the table to curb the North's weapon ambitions, including military strikes. So, intense rhetoric, as usual, from North Korea. You've got a lot of pressure being put on North Korea. Again, you've got China massing troops on their border. You've got China coming out and saying that they literally said that if North Korea crossed China's quote-unquote bottom line, which is, I'm assuming at this point good relations with the United States, that they would actually basically nuke them themselves, is what they pretty much came out and said. Just incredible for rhetoric like that to come from China. Just absolutely incredible. So, I mean, that's, of course, the North Korea's lifeline, and you've got them putting a lot of pressure on them. Of course, the North Korean leader, dictator, Kim Jong-un, he relies on sort of this bravado and sort of coming off as like this basically an unhinged lunatic who's ready to strike a quote-unquote mighty blow, to the United States or whoever else they think that they can actually be able to strike. And we had a previous administration that would fold over to these sort of geopolitical situations. There's a new sheriff in town. And if this kind of rhetoric keeps up, if this kind of action keeps up from North Korea, it's going to reach a point where something is going to have to be done. Something will need to be done, whether that's China acting on its own, whether that's America, the United States and some of our allies, along with South Korea. It doesn't matter. The point is, if the rhetoric and the action of North Korea continues on the path it's on, something will need to be done. And Nikki Haley, who is our ambassador to the United Nations, a lot of people weren't sure about her, but to a lot of people, she is actually turning out to be quite the superstar in the Trump administration. She is very hawkish in many ways. She's very firm on Russia. And also, on a side note, she supports Israel 100%, a complete 100% reversal from the previous administration in a good way, obviously. But of course, she's being pretty hard geopolitically on a lot of different players, and including Russia, which surprised a lot of people. And she has now come out and said that we've got a bit of a red line when it comes to North Korea. And this is from Stars and Stripes. Nikki Haley, U.S. could strike North Korea if it attacks a base or tests ICBM. Both of which, the rhetoric coming from North Korea is that they're going to continue their missile tests and they continue to threaten the United States and our allies, and they continue to move towards having an ICBM and a nuclear warhead that they can put on it that could potentially strike the United States, or most certainly Japan, and of course South Korea. So the tension's getting ratcheted up by the little fat man in Pyongyang, and he's really pushing his luck. The United States could strike North Korea if it attacks a U.S. military base or tests an ICBM, President Donald Trump's UN ambassador said Monday. In several television interviews, Nikki Haley praised China's involvement in trying to pressure North Korea to cease missile testing and criticized Pyongyang's leader, Kim Jong-un, as unstable and paranoid. Asked about the threshold for U.S. action, Haley told NBC's Today Show that if you see him attack a military base, if you see some sort of intercontinental ballistic missile, then obviously we're going to do that. Haley said the U.S. wasn't looking for a fight and wouldn't attack North Korea, quote, unless he gives us reason to do something. South Korean officials say there's a chance the country will conduct its sixth nuclear test on its maiden test launch of an ICBM around the founding anniversary of its military on Tuesday. Haley said the U.S. is working with China to pressure North Korea on the missile and nuclear testing and other issues, including the detonation over the weekend, the detention, over the weekend of a U.S. citizen, bringing to 3 the number of Americans now being held there. Haley said the detentions are North Korea's efforts to, quote, have a bargaining chip for talks with the U.S. Quote, what we're dealing with is a leader who is flailing right now, and he's trying to show his citizens he has muscle, Haley told CBS this morning. So, of course, it's a pretty tense, political situation. There's, obviously American citizens that are detained in North Korea. I'm sure North Korea is scrambling to do whatever it can to have any sort of leverage in this geopolitical situation, of which in reality it has none, especially if it doesn't have the support of China, which at this point it does not seem like it does. So basically the situation is a tinderbox, and the chances of the situation being resolved peacefully without some sort of conflict is becoming more and more unlikely. Again, almost solely due to the North Korean leadership, to Kim Jong-un and his insane rhetoric and action. There's no scenario beyond, quitting the nuclear ambitions and completely abandoning their ICBM testing and missile program. Aside from doing that, there is no situation that works out well for Kim Jong-un. He's played this position where he has this rhetoric that he's going to kill a lot of people if we try to take him out, basically. And that really is all he's got at this point. And many people think that it is just rhetoric. We're unfortunately getting to the point where we're going to find out if it's just rhetoric or if it's not. Of course, hopefully, there can be a peaceful solution here. I'm not so sure that that is going to happen. I think the North Korean leadership is going to have to be removed or eliminated in one way or the other. And hopefully that can be as clean of an operation as possible. But for sure, you've got the rhetoric ratcheting up on the North Korean side, and you've got an administration that has proven that it is not going to stand idly by while insane little dictators say they're going to nuke people. So, we'll see where that all turns out. But man, that little fat man is pushing his luck. And now we move on to an article from Zero Hedge. So Obama is back. He couldn't sit back and just, ride off in the sunset. I mean, I don't think any of us thought that was going to happen, but, we can all dream, right? So from Zero Hedge, Obama to receive $400,000 speaking fee at Cantor Fitzgerald conference. So the guy just, can't get away. Apparently, he just thinks he is absolute gold and is worth $400,000, to say a few words. And I'm sure that was worth every penny, totally. Shortly after Barack Obama delivered his first free speech today since leaving the White House in Chicago before an invitation-only crowd of college students, community organizers, and other fans, Fox News' Charlie Gasparino reports that in what may be his first paid speaking arrangement, Obama will be paid $400,000 to speak at Cantor Fitzgerald's healthcare conference this September, setting the benchmark for how an hour of the former president's time will cost going forward. So of course, this is a president who never really accomplished much of anything in his life. He was a community organizer. He was a senator with very few accomplishments. Of course, he was a lawyer, a Harvard lawyer for a while, a lawyer from Harvard rather, and the guy didn't do a whole lot of anything. He hadn't actually, he's never really worked a real job in his life. Most of the people who profess many Democrat policies and socialism in general usually never do actually work a real job. Otherwise, they would know the value of a dollar. But here you go. You got this guy just walking around spewing his garbage and getting paid $400,000 for it, and guaranteed this is not going to be the last you see of old Barack Hussein Obama, unfortunately. And now we move on to my last story of the day. And this is a doozy. So we've got Antifa. They fashion themselves the anti-fascists is what they claim to be. And we have, from the Conservative Review, a story about the anti-fascists that is just dripping with irony. So here we go. Antifa thugs unmasked by laws originally passed against the KKK. Oh man, I mean, the irony is just delicious. In a standoff between white supremacists and communist thugs, there are no heroes, save local law enforcement. Officially, however, there's some half-decent schadenfreude, I believe, to be found. In a twist of delicious irony, a law originally enacted to deal with the Ku Klux Klan led to the unmasking of several Antifa thugs on the streets of Auburn, Alabama, Tuesday. According to a story by Twitchy, local police told people protesting at a speech by alt-right leader Richard Spencer at Auburn University, which was court-ordered to host him, to take off their hallmark masks. So this is just incredibly hilarious to me. I mean, because these people, say they are the anti-fascist, but of course, time and time again, through their own actions of attempting to block off, to shut down free speech and to block opposing points of view, using violence to reach that goal many times. Classic hallmarks of fascism, mind you, and of course these people say they're anti-fascists, but then they get unmasked because they love to run around in little black masks beating people up because they're so tolerant and liberal. Then they get unmasked by laws that were meant to unmask the Ku Klux Klan. Just I mean, you can't make this stuff up. These people are there, and they're trying to block people from going to see an actual Nazi, Richard Spencer, he is a neo-Nazi. He is. The dude's ridiculous. I mean, he is a modern day racist. And so they're there calling themselves anti-fascists, using fascist tactics, and then they're protesting Nazis, and then they actually get unmasked using laws that were built for the KKK. I mean, this stuff will make your head spin. You really can't make this level of absurdity up. But man, this is just good, because these anti-fascists, these Antifa people are so bad. Even the liberal media and the Democrat establishment won't touch them, because they know that is a group that is absolutely politically toxic. If you can't get endorsed by Chuck Schumer or Chuck Todd, then you've gone off the deep end fully, my friend. That is all I've got to say. And then, of course, the actual law itself is Title 13 of the Alabama State Code prohibits masked people from congregating in public places without facing criminal charges. If you want to publicly gather in the Yellow Hammer State, you can either take your mask off, move along, or leave in cuffs. This, along with a provision, the court order was that it was being enforced. A spokesman for the Auburn Police Department confirms via email. While several states now have laws prohibiting the covering of one's face in public, these laws in the Deep South herald back to the mid-20th century efforts to keep white supremacists from going about incognito to terrorize and intimidate law-abiding students. So, you know, these laws back in the day, back for the KKK, they were, you know, they were there to stop people who were running around like a bunch of thugs, you know, and criminals terrorizing people. And today, it's being used for the same exact thing. People running around like thugs and terrorists, wearing black masks, trying to intimidate people. And then, of course, the person that they were protesting, trying to shut down, is a guy, Richard Spencer, again, a neo-Nazi, a horrible person by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that whole scenario goes to show how, in many ways, the worst elements of society, all around, on both sides, have really been dredged up from, you know, the Black Lagoon. I mean, I don't know where in the heck, what rocks all these people crawled out from under, but I mean, I have never seen so many mobilized neo-Nazis and social justice warrior maniacs in my life than after the election of President Donald J. Trump. My goodness, let me tell you what, it is a sight to behold. Idiots to the left, idiots to the right. Just a big congregation of idiots. And these people are just all ludicrous. They're all absurd. None of them stand for any kind of real principles that, you know, have any value to them. These are all just crazy people capitalizing on some sort of political movement, you know, that they feel like they're a part of. I mean, you got the social justice warriors. They literally think they're part of the new civil rights movement or something like that. And then, of course, you've got the neo-Nazis who are popping up out of the woodwork nowadays, not because of Donald Trump, but because of all of the media establishment, all of the people like Black Lives Matter, all of the Antifa people saying that everybody is racist. Guess what? If you tell everybody that they're racist and horrible, you're going to create some racists. So good job. Good job, you know. This is why we can't have nice things. We get Antifa and freaking neo-Nazis everywhere. So, had enough of these people. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you'll subscribe. Maybe leave me a comment of some sort. If you've got something that you would like to say, any kind of input on the things I've talked about, or want to bring something new up, maybe something you'd like to hear me talk about, or just want to chat, whatever. I'd like to hear from you. And also, if you'd like to hear the audio version of this, I'll have that on SoundCloud. And you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook, and I will have the links to all that in the description. I hope you have a wonderful day, and may the force be